Okay. Take it that's me okay to go now? Well, good morning. My name is Doug Rintoul. I'm the head of IT for Johnston, Carmichael, position which I've had for the last 30 years, which is perhaps a bit too long, but never mind. But today I'm going to talk about the journey about data protection in the professional services sector. Okay. First of all, culture. It's fair to say that the culture in a professional services firm, an accountancy firm, is quite strong. There's quite a strong culture about making sure that we do the right thing for the client, making sure that risk is properly looked after. But even when GDPR came in 2018, there were quite a few little speed bumps along the way. And I'm going to make the session quite informal and a practical one, so I'm not going to go into detail in legislation, more in terms of what we did and the issues I've seen. And one of the first hurdles and little road bumps along the way was communication with clients. Found that a challenge, and trying to make sure that when we communicate with clients is done in a secure manner. The next part was moving to the cloud. Moving to the cloud, we all see it happening at the moment, but how is that actually managed properly in terms of making sure that the processors we take on are actually doing their job properly? Next thing was maybe data breach reporting, how that works in the business. So when you look at culture, you see it works at all different sorts of levels. There's a whole organization, which I've just talked about, in a CA firm, which is, pretty strong in terms of high level of ethics, etc. There's behaviors that we expect to see in a business, and there's your own personal ethics. Are you happy doing the right thing, or are you happy to try and make a mistake, just sweep it under the carpet? So what does good look like? So you can start with maybe non-compliance. Break the rules, but if you get away with it, who cares? No one knows about it. Then you have your tick box exercise. I've done the training, and all firms maybe do that, do their GDPR training for people starting in the business. But do people really get it? We've all seen the scenario where someone's got training on one screen and they're doing their own work on another screen. They're not actually paying attention. But as long as they've ticked the box, then who cares? So we really need to get to that engagement part where people actually get it. And that's the difficult bit. So how do we actually get to that? It says here, see it sorted. Now, here's a number of things we did within the business. The first was, I'll talk about data breach reporting. Now, we tried to make it as painless as possible for people, not to be scared about doing it, because it happens all the time in all businesses. People make mistakes. So we actually created a form in Teams. So when people make a mistake, to send an email to the wrong person, for example, they fill in the form, that goes into a SharePoint list, and we use Power BI to assess that. And that's quite important, because what it means is that all the issues are picked up, and we can actually look at things over a monthly basis and actually see where the issues are. So if a certain business lines making lots of the same sort of mistakes, we can actually intervene and get involved. You may say, well, how does that intervention work? Well, I believe the way you can change it is on two levels. At a personal level, we found that one particular business line, they kept sending out emails with the wrong attachments to clients with information, personal information, and that person kept on making the mistakes. So it's trying to explain to them, well, wait a minute, if that was your personal information that was going out to the wrong person, how would you feel about it? Okay. Also, within that business unit, saying to the person who's in charge of that business unit, it's you that's got to actually phone up the client and tell them that their information was sent to the wrong person. People don't like doing that because it means conflict with a third party. So as soon as you actually put the onus and responsibility on them, they're a bit more on the ball in terms of making sure the rest of the people in their team are actually not making mistakes. Okay. The whole thing regarding email and communication, that was also a challenge. We found that really hard because although internally within the business you could say you can't send unencrypted emails to people, you've got to encrypt personal information. A lot of clients didn't want their emails encrypted. They wanted to have free text emails on so they could read it on their phone. And that was a difficult one, trying to bed that into their organization. So I know this is a horrible, horrible slide. So it does take time going from this lack of engagement, actually going through the effort to actually having it ingrained in the organization. And I think the cyber element, which I'll come on to later on, will actually helps with this one, actually make people get it. And you find that everyone's really got to be together. They've all got to be aligned. You can't have one person going off in the wrong direction. Otherwise, you find the whole thing becomes derailed. And this is quite a corny little saying, and I'm not sure whether data protection aligns with sending a man to the moon, but you get the idea anyway. Everyone plays a little part in it, okay? And no matter what sort of level you are in the business, then you know it's important. Whether the chief executive setting the correct tone for the business, setting the correct organizational culture, from the people below that, speaking to their teams, and from the people that actually send an email out or print out for the wrong pay slip or send the wrong tax return to somebody, everyone's got their part in it. So what I'll do now is I'll go into some of the diligence challenges we saw with processors. With the move to the cloud, mostly software as a service applications, we found there's quite a few challenges around this. Now, diligence in terms of processors, you think, gosh, that sounds pretty dull. And it doesn't just cover data protection, it covers financial, you know, how much is the contract for with that processor, you know, the contract itself in terms of the terms. So you've got to look at the whole thing, the stability of the business, but also the data protection part. I'll read out. The controller should only use processors providing sufficient guarantees to implement appropriate technical and organizational measures in such a manner that processing will meet the requirements of this regulation and ensure the protection of the rights of the data subject. Now, that's quite difficult to put into practical terms. I mean, how would you take that and think, you know what, that's easy, I'll just go and do that. So how would you do that? So this is what I did. Screening the processor, you know, to assess risk and the level of rigor. You can't apply the same level of rigor for every single processor you take on. You'll be there forever. I mean, there are third-party, you know, systems and frameworks that do it for you. But I'm just trying to talk at a small level how you do it. So I would look at things like, are they an existing processor we're buying a different product from? So you know, if it's an existing processor, you know there's a lower level of risk there. Size and age of the business. Is it a new kid in the block? Is it a huge big business who've got lots of established you know, processes in place? Is it a new service on the market? Is this something quite new which has came to market? In which case, let's just make sure we know exactly what's going on here, because if it's something that's been on the market for ages, you know, it's well known, it's less riskier, whereas if it's new, it's more risk involved. Documented security breaches. You can just go into Google, you know, look up security breach and the name of the company processor you're looking for, and just do your homework. Just try and see what's going on. And also the volume and types of records. How much information are you actually giving to that business? The volume and both the types of information. Is there sensitive information, or is it just low risk information? And lastly, as we're probably all aware, where are the data centers located? If they're cloud-based, you know, are they in the European Economic Area, the UK, you know, the States, etc. Now, I've just covered off a few things here. So where does this go to? No, What I would normally do is then create a privacy impact assessment for that project we're doing with that processor. You got a summary of the project, what personal data is in place, why it's been processed, where it's been stored, if outside the EEA, and the security credentials of the supplier. If you look at GDPR, it says that the processor's got to have the same or higher level of security credentials as you've got in place. So I'd look to see, are they ISO 27001? You know, have they got Cyber Essentials, Cyber Essentials Plus, you know, SOC 2 and all these sorts of things, just to make sure they've actually got things in place, you know. Can I have a look at your data processing agreement? Some of them don't have a clue what data processing agreement is, you know, and if so, I'll pass them one that we've got, you know, because you have to have these legal things in place. Privacy statement, do they actually have that in place as well? Does that business actually get it? Do they understand what's going on? And you'll be surprised at how many haven't got no idea at all. And what risks can you see? Risks, I would say, would be things like using a SaaS application and there's no single sign-on, there's no MFA, there's no way to control, to easily make sure that users are taken off the system when they've been provisioned, you know, if people leave your business. So how easy it is to deprovision users. So there's all these sorts of risks you've got to look at. The biggest issue I have found is diligence as an afterthought. How many have you had the situation where, let's say, I'll pick on marketing, poor old marketing, have met with suppliers, maybe they've got a project in mind, and they've met with several suppliers. They've put out, you know, requests for quotes. They've got all the tenders in. They've met all the, you know, the suppliers, and they say, you know what, we're going to go for supplier X, Y, and Z. You know what? I'll just call in GRC, governance, risk, and compliance, and IT. I'll just have them tick the box, and we come in and we say, well, wait a minute, there's issues here. You're a blocker. We want to use these guys. This is the best part. This is the best product on the market, and we want to use them. And you're the one that's saying, sorry, because of X, Y, and Z. And that can be quite, you know, difficult conversation with these people because they want to use these people. So you have to get, again, the culture of the business is saying to these people at the business line heads or the service line heads, bring me in at the start. Don't pull me in at the end when you've already made your decision. I have to actually know what it is you're doing. And that eventually gets into their minds and they realize, wait a minute, I have to do this. And if they don't do it, what happens is when they get sign off, part of the sign off says, have you consulted and checked all this? And if they say no, they have to come back. This is the other one, and this is a true example. The processor who has no idea, and this is a true one. The story here is that, again, as one of our departments picked a product, a supplier they wanted to use a processor, and they called me at the end and went, Douglas, can you just tick this off? We just need to get, we're happy with this product. We want to move forward with it. And I went, well, okay. Can I have a look at your privacy statement, your data processing agreement? Can I check your security? And we found that this company had been on the market for maybe a year, a small business, UK based. And I asked them for their privacy statement. And obviously you can see here, it says 1998. And I thought, wait a minute, I might be really thick here. Was it GDPR? Was it 2018? It was, wasn't it? And so I questioned them, can I have a copy of your DPA? And they said, that's exactly what the guy said to me. Not my area of expertise, we'll find out. We've had the ICO review the privacy policy and the terms and conditions. Now, I'm not sure about you, I've never had the ICO review my terms and conditions and make sure they're okay. It'd be great, wouldn't it? A free check by the ICO and your terms and conditions of privacy policy. It doesn't happen. It's complete, utter, you know, I could say something, pants. These people are just lying. So you have to be quite strong here and say, you know, sorry, I'm being fobbed off here. No, you're not using that supplier because quite clearly they haven't got a clue what they're doing. They're not clear about their legal responsibilities. And if they're not clear about that, how do we know what sort of mess is behind the scenes? Okay. So yeah, I found that quite funny, that one. Subprocessors, another headache. How I think it's utterly impossible to keep track of subprocessors. I've put down subprocessors, especially when you're dealing with firms in the States and they've maybe got subprocessors who are in other parts of the country, other parts of the world, sorry, and they've got other subprocessors, or your big group structures. It's very, very difficult. Again, as I said, near enough impossible to do so. The only advice I do there is that looking to see if the main processor you deal with is at a level where you can see they take the actual security and their responsibilities, properly. If they're a bit, you can see they're not taking things well, then you understand that they probably not making sure that their subprocessors and their subprocessors are playing the game as well. So you just have to keep control of that one. But again, it's mission impossible, I think, on that one when you go far enough down the chain. Finally, I'm going to talk about, time's marching on, security challenges of hybrid working, right? Now, I can't cover the whole thing here. This is my sort of area that I normally focus on, but I'm just going to give you some little sort of pointers to take away here of both people doing hybrid working, working at home, etc. Despite what you may think are here, the main threat to business is through phishing or spear phishing emails. I'm not going to go into what the difference is between them, but email is the key area you've got to look out for in terms of threats against your business, as well as remote access to externally facing services. Heard someone mention RDS today, remote desktop services. That's where people remote into your systems to access a remote desktop. That's those are the two key ones here. Employees at home, the blending of personal and business. They've got a laptop there. You know what? Let's put Spotify on it. Let's do this with it. No, because I'm at home. So it's just trying to make sure that these employees at home are aware, even though they're at home, they're still really in the business, so to speak. How do you manage those devices at home? How do you make sure they're compliant, that they're patched, that you're checking what's going on with them, that the AV's on them properly, the AV's been updated. If there's an issue, you get told straight away. One of the big areas I see is supplier or customer email compromise. The supply chain is the biggest issue hitting businesses, I find, at the moment, where a customer is hacked, they had their email compromised, maybe on Office 365. The criminal gets into email and then sends an email into us saying, oh, by the way, James, can you maybe look at this document? Oh, I know James, he's from my client. I'll click on that. And suddenly they're asked to put in their Office 365 details, and the criminal gets access to their email as well. Okay, so that's one of the big difficult ones. And rise in SaaS services, as I mentioned, how do we know that users are being added in properly and deprovisioned as well? For internal IT, you add them to Active Directory, and it's pretty simple enough. You keep them within that castle walls, but when things move out to SaaS, software as a service, there's masses of all these applications. How would you keep control of that? So here's my giveaways. Right. First of all, don't just patch Windows, but check all the other things that are on the machines as well. Things like Chrome, Zoom, Adobe Acrobat. Again, every month you get an update from Windows. Make sure that's patched and on. Understand your blast radius. Now, what that means is that if someone in your team gets hacked and hit, what's that person's sphere of influence? Do they have access to every single system in your business, or have they only got access to a small part of the business? In other words, don't just blankly give out access to everyone, to everything. Keep people, as tight as possible. Least privilege is what it's called in the industry. Don't give people local admin rights on laptops, because if they have local admin rights, if a malicious party gets on, then they've got rights as well to access systems. Pen testing, penetration testing, not that expensive. I mean, someone could externally pen test your a few IP addresses, maybe a few hours, and run some checks on them. So it doesn't have to be that expensive. Internal as well. You can get people in for a few days. Maybe it doesn't cost that much to, just run some pen tests internally, vulnerability scanning systems, just to see where you are. It's good to know where you are so you can make changes if need be. This is more for IT, but make sure if you have privileged people in IT, they have separate user logins for admin and for normal user access. That way, if someone in IT gets hacked, then the hacker doesn't have access to all the high security systems. MFA, multi-factor authentication. You need, if you're using SaaS services, software as a service, like Office 365 or any other web systems, you need to make sure the MFA is in place or single sign-on, okay? Otherwise, how do you know how tight the passwords are that people are using? Moving at passwords, passphrases. I mean, years ago, I would maybe run tests to see what people's passwords were, very naughty, and it was amazing me how many people still had password 123 as their password. And you're like, seriously, don't you get it? So you push onto passphrases, for example, like water, green, paper, 56, just a collection of 2 or 3 words. Train users with test phishing emails. I'm sure you've seen that before. It was mentioned today about Cyber Essentials and Cyber Essentials Plus, government push schemes. These are really important to at least raise the ballpark, the line within the business to get the business up to a certain level. And the other ones here, I'll leave the logs one, but a lot of small businesses use an MSP, managed service provider, but do your own checks and your own audits on your systems. We do Cyber Essentials and CE Plus tests on some clients who use MSPs, and you find a complete mess there because they're trusting what they're being told by their IT supplier, and sometimes these guys aren't as good as they should be. And last one, you had AV. AVs came on, antiviruses came on a lot in the last few years, moving on from signature-based detection to things like advanced threat protection. All sounds quite scary. So you may find now there's far more advanced systems on the market that you can use, even with third parties sitting behind it. You can actually check what's going on, and if they see a breach, they can step in, to deal with it. I'd be glad to say, and finally, this is the scary slide. So let's assume your business has been breached, and what would you do if someone had exfiltrated data, encrypted your systems? You may see at the moment over in Ukraine, they're not just encrypting, they're using called wiperware, where they basically just wipe the systems completely. They don't care, they just out to cause damage. And this is a changing situation at the moment. And to be fair, a lot of these attacks are probably at bigger organizations in the US, maybe the UK, but the collateral fallout, could easily reach across the business. So it's quite an unknown at the moment. That's why I'm probably trying to push a lot of these things on to everyone. Are your backups separate from your production? Don't have single sign-on between your normal production and your backup system. What I mean is, if you log into Windows, for example, as admin, don't let that allow you to log into the backup system with the same login and password. Make sure it's completely separate. That way, if your main systems get breached, they don't have access to your backups. And one of the bad things about this, if you were breached and got ransomware or wiperware, you're not only restoring your key systems, but you could be restoring every single laptop in the business. I did hear a major oil company that got hit a few years ago, and maybe they had about 300 servers. Maybe about 5 or 6 had ransomware on them. They took those servers down, cleaned them, brought them back up, only to find another server got infected. They cleaned that, and it was like whack-a-mole. Every time they tried to clean it, something else got infected. So eventually they had to bring the whole lot down, bring every single server up individually, clean it, and then get all the laptops back, re-image them all. So it's a hell of a work. And this last point here, I'm not sure you heard about Tucker Solicitors LLP, and it's been on the ICO's website. They were fined, gosh, how much does it say there? £98,000 recently. Why? Because they had really poor security systems. They didn't have MFA in place, and they got their clients' personal data encrypted, exfiltrated, stolen, because they hadn't taken due care and attention to protect their systems. So it's not just the fact you'll get hit and you could lose data, the fact that you'll be fined for the ICO as well for not taking due care and attention. So on that bombshell, I'm not sure I am for time, but 5 minutes to go, it looks like. So any questions or any comments or thoughts?
You mentioned earlier about some of the problems you faced early on with things like customers not happy with receiving encrypted emails. How do you deal with that?
Very, very difficult, because the customer is the customer, and the customer says, I don't want that, then you have to do what the customer says. If you say, sorry, I'm not doing that, then the customer could say, well, goodbye, I'll go somewhere else. Unfortunately, you have to realize that not everyone places such a high reliance and interest in this area, and a lot of people really don't care as much. In which case, all we've done, and it may not be 100% correct, is say to that person, could you maybe give me in writing the fact that here are the risks? So I put an email to them, outline all the risks and why we're doing it, and say, if you're happy that we don't do this, then come back to me and put in writing, you don't want us to encrypt, and we won't do it.
Yeah, I find I'm in Aviva, so we have like enforced encryption on our emails that get sent out.
Yeah.
But when we have customers who, I think in this day and age, customers quite often will set up their own domains, and if they set up a domain that doesn't accept, not every email domain accepts emails, so they say, well, you can't, I can't access that email. We have got various portals that they might not be happy going to, whatever, but it is quite tricky because customers often don't want to they want to set up an email domain that is solely for that purpose, because they don't want to be spammed with other information, other emails, whatever. So I think customers often set up an email domain that is specifically for purposes of, say, insurance or whatever, their financial side, and it may be because it's their own domain, they haven't got the proper encryption on it, and I do find that quite tricky to explain to customers. It's
difficult. I mean, the way around that most people find now is to use a portal to log into instead, because email is just a pain.
Customers don't like the portal either.
No, it's never going to be perfect. You can just do your best. I'm not sure at the back whether there's any questions. Oh yeah.
Different question. In terms of encrypted email services, there's one or two that I use personally. Are there any ones that you would personally recommend?
The gentleman's, just so everyone else can hear on there, but talking about encrypted email services. Now, we do use one, so I'm careful not to push it forward, but that has been challenged across the business. The different parts of email encryption I look at is you've got the encryption, which is reasonably simple. You can even do it in Outlook just now in Office 365. There's encryption built into that at the moment with the correct licenses, I feel, or you can put in TLS between different email domains as well. So the encryption part isn't the problem. The biggest problem I find is people sending it to the wrong person, using auto, and it happens all the time, right? Again, when I come to the company we use, we have a little thing where it pops up and says, are you happy to send it to Joe Blogs at blah? And you've got to click on the person's name and the attachments and the name of the subject line. But people still, because they're in a hurry, click, 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 send. Oh dear, I've sent it to the wrong person. So the last thing is being able to remove that email. So we use egress. It's not perfect, so I'm not going to say it's the 100% golden bullet, but it does allow you to go into to remove the email. So basically, you just kill it, and the person's no longer got access to it. Which I think it's a good thing from an ICO point of view, because you can prove then that you're taking due care and attention. The problem you've got is that you can't widespread just apply it across everyone and all emails, because not all emails have got personal data. We do audits on companies that's not got personal data. We may use doing corporate finance deals, not personal data. And egress then can be seen as a hurdle, and you get told, well, I don't want to use this for that. But some parts like personal tax, you're sending a tax return to somebody who doesn't want to use a portal, like Lisa said, then yes, you have to encrypt it. So it's a difficult subject, and you may find HMRC, for example, don't like taking egress emails. Some of the banks don't like taking them either. So you got all these hurdles coming along the lines.
Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting because I've noticed, like, I use like G Suite and other like platforms, and I've noticed that they've increased the encryption where like there's like a time limit thing where you can actually send a file and an email, and there's like a time limit on the email where it actually expires. You can choose what's that one? You said not multi-factor authentication. I think it was a one-time passcode.
Oh, code, yeah.
For them to actually access the email. So it's quite interesting where everything is going. But I think a follow-up question I want to ask you, Douglas, is I don't know if you were in the session earlier on this morning where basically we're discussing how privacy can go too far. It becomes a bit like intrusion with face detection and everything like that. Do you think, in terms of emails and encryption and things like that, do you feel like there's a position where we could go too far, where it becomes too much friction to send an email?
I'll just repeat that one. The gentleman's asking if we can go, if there's a position where we go too far in terms of putting on encryption and controls, which actually stops business operating. I think yes, there's got to be a halfway house. There's got to be an assessment of risk. Risk is the one you've got to look at and understand what's been put out. For example, payroll information, we do that for a lot of our clients. So we are the processor then, and we are dealing with our clients' employees. So there's lots of bank account information. So areas like that, sorry, tough. It's got to be in place, to keep that safe. And if the client comes back and says, I'm not happy with it, then maybe you're the wrong type of client we want to deal with, and you've got to take that stance. But other areas, I completely agree. If you're conversing on a deal, it can be a huge blocker, and it just irritates people. So, yeah, fortunately so.
Thank you, Douglas.
You're welcome. Oh. Is that us?
Yeah, no more questions?
Oh, well, okay. Thanks, everyone. Okay, cheers.
Thank you very much.